was supposed to fight Wesley Snipes. That was real.
Alright guys, how's it going? And welcome to the Action Channel. So around here, it's all about whooping some serious booty, which is what we're gonna do today. And we might as well take it outside, because today the video is about Joe Rogan. Was he ever supposed to fight Wesley Snipes in a real fight? In the ring? Really? Let's get into it. Now, most of us know Joe Rogan from, of course, being the podcast king of the whole freaking planet. And he's pretty damn cool and interesting. And he has that background in martial arts, which, of course, we're going to take a look at. And then we have good old Wesley Snipes, Mr. Passenger 57. And he also has a background in martial arts. So let's see what these two guys are all about. And to see if there was ever a time when they actually were going to fight. Hey! Now, before we start breaking things here today, why don't you start by smashing that like and subscribe button? Okay, now this story sounds too good or too crazy to be true, wouldn't you say? I mean, Wesley Snipes, one of the biggest action martial arts stars of the 1990s. And then, of course, we have comedian Joe Rogan. Now, right off the bat, it does not sound like a fair fight, right? Well, not so fast. Joe Rogan has a serious background in martial arts and was a Taekwondo champion when he was younger. He has also studied jiu-jitsu and is very highly respected in the martial arts community. Okay, so the big question here, were these two warriors ever going to fight each other in the ring? Well, this might take you by surprise, but the answer is yes, absolutely. Okay, so who came up with this clever idea of having these two guys square off? And when exactly was this? And most importantly, well, why? Okay, so we have to go back to 2008. Wesley Snipes was actually convicted of tax evasion and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. I believe he served something like 28 months. Apparently, from what I've been able to dig up on the guy, it seemed like he had very bad advisors at the time that simply said, well, you know, you don't have to pay for everything, blah, 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 blah. And I guess he bought it. Now, unfortunately, the law looked at it differently, and he ended up having to pay millions of dollars that I guess he didn't have at the time. And since his movie career wasn't going very well, and he was doing these straight-to-video, low-budget movies, it would have taken him forever to pay all this money. And I guess the authorities and the IRS were not exactly that patient. So he had to come up with something quick, right here, right now. So someone suggested, how about a fight that will draw a lot of attention? Like a celebrity fight between two well-known fighters. In the beginning, it seemed like he was going to fight Jean-Claude Van Damme, which actually would have been really cool. I mean, could you imagine a fight in the ring with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and both of them actually had a background in Shotokan karate? I believe Van Damme is a 2-degree black belt, whereas Wesley Snipes, I think, is a 4-degree black belt. But it would have been very interesting. They're also roughly around the same age, so that would have been pretty cool, actually. Now, obviously, that fight didn't happen. I don't know if Van Damme wasn't interested, but since Van Damme's career was not going very well either at that time, they were sort of considered B-movie stars and probably would not draw much of a crowd. So someone suggested, how about someone more current? And that's when they brought up Joe Rogan's name. Now, Wesley Snipes at the time probably thought this was going to be a walk in the park. I mean, a martial arts expert versus what, a comedian? Yeah, that doesn't sound very threatening, does it? But if Wesley just needed a few bucks just so he could get out of trouble, then who the hell cares? Then why not? Okay, so they called up Joe Rogan and asked if he was interested in fighting Mr. Blade. And surprisingly enough, he said, hell yeah, let's do it. So all of a sudden now it seemed like it was going to happen. Suddenly there were lawyers involved, and it seemed like this is going to be a big, big deal. So how did Mr. Rogan actually prepare for this fight? Joe Rogan put everything on hold and literally trained twice a day for 6 months. He trained kickboxing in the morning and jiu-jitsu at night. Alright, so let's take a pause for the cause and ask this question. How good were they? Let's start by checking into their background as fighters. Wesley Trent Snipes was born on July 31st, 1962. Which, by the way, means that he's 5 years older than Joe Rogan. So if we do the math correctly, that means around the time of this fight, he would have been around 45, 46 years old, and Joe Rogan 40 or 41. So in regards to father times, Joe Rogan would have had a slight advantage here. Now, Wesley began training martial arts at the age of 12, so obviously he's been doing it for a long time. And I believe he's a 4th or 5th degree black belt in Shotokan karate and a 2-degree black belt in Hapkido. He has also practiced Kung Fu and Capoeira. So altogether, pretty all-rounded. Over the years, he has not shied away from showing all his martial arts skills in the movies. In fact, you can say he went from being a more serious actor to becoming an action star. Usually it would be the other way around. So he loves all this fighting and stunt stuff in the movies. Now, of course, we cannot talk about the man's macho action career without mentioning the Three Blade movies that has a huge fan base all over the planet. So when we add it all up, I would say Wesley is probably a very decent fighter. Alright, and now let's check out Mr. Rogan himself and see what he has to offer in the ring, based on his martial arts background. Joe Rogan started out with Taekwondo and is a black belt. He has also studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in which he also holds a black belt. He received his belt back in 2012. Now we may counter and say, yeah, but Wesley Snipes is a 5th degree black belt in Shotokan Karate. I think a lot of people, including myself, will say that in general, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in a fight is much more efficient compared to Shotokan Karate. And it also seems like Joe Rogan has kept up with his fighting and stays in pretty good shape all year round. I don't know how Wesley Snipes are doing these days. Of course, this fight were to take place in 2008, and back then it could have been a completely different story. As a teenager, Rogan trained religiously, and he also competed and became Massachusetts full-contact Taekwondo champion 4 years in a row. By the age of 19, he also won the US Open Taekwondo Championship. Around age 20, he also got involved with judo. So when we add it all up with Rogan here, does this guy sound like a typical stand-up comedian? Anyway, this was just to give you a little idea of their backgrounds. Okay, so what exactly happened between these two guys and this fight? So apparently the fight fell through, which for fighting fans around the world really sucked. Well, according to Joe Rogan, he said that in the beginning, Wesley Snipes probably thought it was going to be a walk in the park. However, then he found out that Joe Rogan was actually a Taekwondo champion and he had a serious background in martial arts. And maybe that actually ended up intimidating him a bit. So here's why Joe Rogan thinks that Wesley Snipes ran the other way.
I think because he knew I was going to kill him.
Okay, so let's just pause this for a second and comment on that statement. Do you think that Joe Rogan would have been able to actually kill Wesley Snipes or at least beat the living crap out of him? Now, I never thought I would take fighting advice from Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, but in the movie he says, rule number 1, never underestimate your opponent. Expect the unexpected. Now, to me, I have to be honest, I think it sounds like Joe Rogan did underestimate Wesley Snipes. Or maybe he was just extremely confident in his own abilities, which of course is also very important as a fighter. You might even argue and say it's the most important thing. I would love to hear if you guys think that he would have destroyed him. Anyway, let's get back to what happened next. Apparently in the beginning they were supposed to get paid the same, like 50-50. Then later it changed to 60-40 in Wesley Snipes' favor. Finally Joe Rogan said, hey, just pay me whatever. Let's just do the fight. And maybe that intimidated Wesley Snipes. And perhaps Wesley Snipes realized, this guy is the real deal. He's not just a funny guy. He's actually going to kill me. Now again, it would be interesting to hear what Wesley Snipes has to say about this whole experience. But unfortunately, I've not been able to dig much up on the guy in regards to this fight. Now, it was supposed to be an MMA fight, which would have been pretty interesting, especially since neither of them had ever done that. However, as mentioned, Rogan had competed when he was younger, so he knew this whole idea of what it's like to be on the mat, looking the other guy in the eyes, realizing you have nothing and no one to depend on except from yourself. Whereas Wesley Snipes apparently had never done any competitive fighting. So if Wesley had to step on the mat for the very first time thinking, hey, this is going to be a piece of cake, maybe he would have been in for a surprise. Now again, of course the fight never actually took place, so we'll never really know what happened. But it seemed like Joe Rogan was very confident that he would win this fight. One reason is that he has actually done a lot of jiu-jitsu, whereas Wesley Snipes has never done any of that. So if Wesley were to be taken down on the ground, there maybe was not a whole lot he could do. Now, just because you look good and macho on the big screen, does that mean you know how to fight in real life? Well, that's a whole different question. Some people will say, no, well, they're just actors and they don't know how to fight in real life. Well, actually, I disagree. Sometimes there's a reason that you see people on the big screen fighting. Yes, of course, it could be that you're a big movie star and that half the fighting is being done by your stunt double. And occasionally you throw in a few punches yourself. However, some actors, especially if they end up working in action films like Big Bad Henchmen or action heroes, many times they actually have a background either in WWE, football, maybe martial arts, maybe some other physical abilities that they've been able to showcase in the movies. I mean, for example, you would never say that someone like Chuck Norris is just an actor, would you? I mean, he started out as a fighter. He was a professional fighter for 12 years, and during the last 6 years of his competitive career, he held the world title. So I don't think anyone would say that, well, Chuck is just an actor anyway, even though he did a lot of action movies and was an action star in the 80s and 90s. And what about Benny Urquidez? I mean, he fought Jackie Chan twice, 2 movies in the 1980s alone, and he's done a lot of other work in Hollywood. So would you also say that, well, you know, the guy is just an actor anyway? I mean, that guy is one of the baddest fighters that ever lived. So maybe there's a reason that they also put him in the movies. So to sum it up, does that mean that Wesley Snipes cannot fight? Of course he can. In fact, you can be a martial artist without having to be competitive. You don't have to be in the MMA. You can still be a great martial artist. And there's no doubt that Wesley Snipes fits into that category. Now, a lot of people, of course, want to turn this into a more juicy story than it really is. So there are these rumors that Joe Rogan does not like Wesley Snipes and just wants to F him up, even to this day. Joe Rogan has said several times that he actually always liked Wesley Snipes and that he has no beef with him, and that he's a big fan of especially the Blade movies. So this was just about a fight. Nothing personal, nothing more, nothing less. Alright, you hard asses, now I have a question for you. Who do you think would win a fight between Wesley Snipes and Joe Rogan? Please like, subscribe, share the video and all that, but most importantly, tell me who you think would win and why. Anyway, thanks for checking this out. I'll see you next week for some more bloody action.